Welcome to lab number 3, determining maximal muscle strength and muscular endurance. My name is Kirsten Hawk and I am one of the TAs for this course. I know a lot of our interaction is occurring virtually this year, but please do not hesitate to reach out and contact us at any time. So with that being said, we'll just jump right in here. So today's lab, we are going to take a look at the procedures utilized in 3 different muscular assessments. Muscular tests are important and valuable tools used to monitor improvements as well as assess impairments, imbalances, or deficits in muscle performance. And this includes through activities that include strength, power, or endurance assessment. It's important to note that muscle force is influenced by a variety of factors, including the specific muscle group being utilized, the contraction type, the relationship between force and velocity, the force length, the muscle architecture, the fiber type and the muscle size itself, and then the neural activation occurring. It's also important to note that the exercises used for these tests should be selected according to the demands of the client. And this means that for non-athletes, we would select exercises to target major muscle groups to provide us with an overall indication of strength, while for a trained athlete, we may select more isolated or targeted exercises to really zone in on those smaller muscle groups.
So as stated in your document, the purpose of this lab is to provide you with virtual experience in administering muscular fitness tests, to learn the appropriate protocols for various strength and muscular endurance tests, to perform a strength to body weight ratio for comparative purposes, to perform standard load test calculations, to understand the various risks associated with this type of testing, and to understand how to interpret the results that we do find. During this particular session, we are going to look at 3 main tests, one of them being the 1 rep max strength test, another being the standard load test, and a third being the relative load test. I just wanted to make note here that there are different procedures to test maximal muscle strength and muscular endurance. Some of them can be sport specific, but for the purpose of this lab, we are just going to look at these 3. So what is strength? Strength is defined as the force or torque developed during a voluntary muscle contraction. This is most commonly measured in kilograms or newtons of force, where 1 kilogram is equal to 9.8 newtons. So more specifically, maximal muscle strength is simply the maximal force developed by a muscle or muscle group in a single voluntary contraction, irrespectively of time. As stated earlier, the accurate measurement of strength is confounded by several factors. This means that the angle of contraction of the joint involved, the movement pattern, the contraction speed, and the type of contraction all need to be specified. Maximal strength training is often characterized by a lifted load using 1 to 5 repetition testing. However, muscle strength is very dependent on a person's ability to activate the neuromuscular system and the intramuscular coordination specific to that muscle action. Strength can be measured using isometric, concentric, and eccentric actions. Isometric or static refers to applying force against an irremovable object. This means that the length of the muscle remains unchanged. The concentric phase of a lift occurs when a muscle contracts and shortens, while the eccentric phase of a lift occurs when a muscle contracts and lengthens. Overall, strength testing can effectively monitor the rehabilitative process after injury and provide an objective criterion for the resumption of activity across both athlete and the general population. So just quickly, I wanted to identify the equipment used in this lab. If we did have the opportunity to conduct face-to-face labs this semester, please note that most of this equipment can be found in the Flex or basically at any other public gym. Therefore, if you can safely access such amenities, please feel free to do so for your own benefit. Equipment needed includes a constant resistant exercise machine, otherwise known as cable actuated, barbells, this would be 35 pounds for women and 80 pounds for men, a flat bench and weights, barbells or dumbbells, exercise mats, and a metronome. So this lab does have a rather simple setup. If we were doing this today, I would instruct you guys to head over to the Flex to perform most of these activities, as there's a lot greater range of equipment there to perform the tests that we need. What would happen is we would divide off into pairs. One student would be the one being measured while the other student acts as the trainer. After all exercise tests are completed, I would ask you guys to rotate. The first thing I need you to do when you come into the lab, though, would be to measure your client's body weight and then record this value for later use. On the side here, I do have an image of what that looks like in the lab, but this is a basic thing that you guys probably already know at this point. 1 rep max or repetition maximum means the weight a person can lift only once. Free weights or weightlifting machines can be utilized to determine a 1 rep max quite effectively. These next two videos demonstrate a 1 rep max using a bench press and a leg press. So we're just going to go over some key points to consider while conducting these tests. 1. Standardize the starting joint angle so that each subject begins a lift on the same relative portion of the strength curve. 2. Note body position. Deviations from proper technique may invalidate or inflate the score. 3. The client needs to understand what denotes a successful lift. 4. The lift must begin from a motionless start point. 5. The movement should occur as hard and as fast as possible. 6. A specific warm-up of 5 to 10 reps should occur first. 7. The subject must lift a succession of heavier and heavier weights until a maximum is reached. 8. A second trial should be allowed at the weight at which a subject fails. 9. It is better to start roughly 20% below an estimated 1 rep max and build up. 10. A 2 to 4 minute rest period is recommended between sets to allow ATP and CP levels to restore in the muscles.
So we are now going to take a look at the 1 rep max bench press. So in this example here, the athlete lifts the bar above their head with their hands in line with their shoulders. The bar then tracks straight down and she does not touch the bar to her chest. This movement is considered successful if the arms reach full extension while the back and buttocks remain in contact with the bench. As we can see here, multiple sets are also performed. In set 1, 3 to 4 reps are performed. In set 2, 2 to 3, and in set 3, a 1 rep max would be attempted. For progression or increases in weight increments, for the arm muscle groups, we tend to look at 5 to 10% or 10 to 20 pound additions, depending on the ability of your client. So we are now going to take a look at the 1 rep max leg press. The leg press is considered successful if the client reaches a 90-degree bend in the knees, followed by a full extension while keeping their back in contact with the bench. Now the client is seen moving on to set 2 as replicated in the 1 rep max bench press. So more weight is added. She then returns to the bench to complete 2 to 3 repetitions of the same movement. This is to allow her to approach a weight that can be considered a 1 rep maximum. Now, for the lower body, we can look at adding 10 to 20% weight increments or 30 to 40 pound increments. But this is again specific to the needs and abilities of your client. So now here we see her attempt her third or final 1 rep max attempt. If this movement is successful, it can be recorded as a maximum attempt. If it is unsuccessful, the client may take a few moments rest and attempt again.
So just to finish off this section of the lab, we're going to go over some limitations of the 1 rep max. So often, well-motivated subjects can deviate from standardized technique, and this can lead to invalidation of the results. The validity of this method also depends on how specifically the tests reflect the movement patterns of the sport if the subject is an athlete. The weightlifting method is restricted to identifying the limiting point during the muscle strength curve compared to the resistance supplied by the barbell. This means that true peak force of the muscle strength curve may not be identified. Test-to-test variation is about 10% in this method, and the sensitivity of this method is limited. This protocol also requires maximal effort. This means it should only be used for subjects who have experience with weightlifting. This table contains the results of 1 rep max exercises. Be sure to complete this portion in your own labs. Also note that the following videos in this section are examples of each of the exercises. So because we have already discussed bench press and leg press, please refer back to those slides to review the video. Otherwise, continue on to view lat pull down, leg extension, arm curl, and leg curl. Please note that it is the student's responsibility to complete columns 2 and 3 on this chart. Any data tables referred to in this lab will be found in the textbook or in lecture notes. So just a little bit more information on filling out these charts for this lab. What we are asking you to do is to rank clients' muscular strength based on standard norms. So if the intent is to classify muscular strength in relation to total body weight, you're going to divide the total amount lifted in pounds by the client's body weight in pounds. Standard norms are then used to evaluate this relative strength ratio. For example, if a 30-year-old female who weighed 130 pounds has a 1 rep max leg press of 150 pounds, her ratio would be 1.15 or 150 pounds divided by 130 pounds, which is a rating of fair on the scales that have been provided.
So now here we just have some images to display the movements that were described on the previous slide. So first off, we have the lat pull down, and this movement is successful when the bar goes from overhead and is pulled down to chest or collarbone height. The next movement is the leg extension. This is completed by fully extending the legs out from the body while keeping the back and buttocks in contact with the bench. The arm curl is the third movement shown here, and this can be performed on a constant resistance machine or by using a free weight or barbell. And this is performed when the arms start from an extended or straight position, and then the bar is then lifted to approximately the belly button level and then released back down. The final movement is the leg curl, and this movement is successful when the machine is pulled into the 90-degree position there with the hamstrings.
The second test conducted in this lab is a standard load test. This is a test of muscle endurance since the weight assigned is standard for all subjects and the total number of repetitions possible is determined. Since such absolute endurance tests are highly related to strength, they can be used as an indirect measure of strength without requiring the subject to lift a maximal weight. In 1991, Virgo et al. Found that a standard 80-pound bench press muscular endurance test for males was highly correlated with a 1 rep max bench press, whereas push-ups to failure were not. They then developed a regression equation to predict the 1 rep max from the standard load bench press repetition score. This procedure is administered using the YMCA bench press test according to standardized procedures. Women use a 35-pound barbell, while men use an 80-pound barbell. A metronome is then set for 60 BPM so that the client performs 30 repetitions per minute of the exercise. The trainer is to count the number of repetitions completed until the client is unable to maintain the exercise cadence. As shown in this video, a bench press is performed using a 35-pound dumbbell until the client falls behind the required cadence. The number of repetitions done can be used as a measure of muscular endurance or as a predictor of 1 rep max strength. To predict 1 rep max strength, use the formula listed in the data analysis step 5. Significant limitations for the standard load test include no predictive formula is presently available for females. This method will also likely overpredict strength for athletes who do a great deal of anaerobic muscular endurance training. Muscle soreness may result following this test, and a major limitation is a lack of normative data. The third and final portion of this lab is a muscular endurance test, otherwise known as a relative load test. Muscular endurance is the ability to sustain submaximal contractions. When a standard submaximal weight or resistance is assigned, the ability to sustain contractions is highly related to strength, as long as the absolute load taxes a relatively high percentage of maximum strength. Or, when a submaximal load is assigned as a relative percentage of strength, the number of repetitions achieved is not related to strength. In fact, increased strength may actually reduce relative muscular endurance. The relative load push-up test is a standardized procedure used to measure muscular endurance. Women are asked to use a modified push-up position, while men can use the standard position. One is to count the maximal number of push-ups performed consecutively without rest. The standard or relative load bench press test was suggested as a method of indicating strength without requiring maximal contractions. This test is actually a measure of absolute muscular endurance. During this test, one is to select the 1 rep max bench press results and have the client use a submaximal weight that can be lifted for fewer than 10 reps. One is then to record the submaximal weight and the number of consecutive repetitions completed until fatigue. As demonstrated by this subject, modified push-ups are done from the knees while feet remain in contact with the floor. The feet do not bear any weight. From here, the subject assumes a plank-like position, ensuring that their back is flat and their buttocks is down. Push-ups can then be performed, ensuring a full range of motion is being maintained. Hands are either shoulder width or slightly wider, and elbows should track straight back or to a slight outwards angle. Repetitions count when the chest and the chin almost make contact with the floor and full extension back up is made. Regular push-ups are performed from the feet. In this case, the client will set up in a plank position, weight pushing through the heels downwards. The back should maintain in a flat position and the head in a neutral spot. When lowering down, the client needs to almost touch their chin and their chest to the floor and then have full extension back up for the repetition to count. The endurance bench press is performed using the same technique as described earlier in this lab. The subject is required to pause briefly between the eccentric and concentric phases to prevent any aid from the rebound effect. The maximum number of repetitions accomplished before falling behind the metronome cadence is recorded. It is ideal to select a weight at approximately 75% of your 1 rep max for this bench press test. Limitations of this test are as stated. The validity of the test depends on the care with which you determine the relative load, the speed of contractions, and the exercises to be used. The more specifically those factors relate to the sport or goal of the client, the more valid the test becomes. Load varies with body fat distribution and weight. This means that there's a limited normative data for relative load tests. Please be sure to complete any of the results page that has not been provided for you. You may need to refer to your textbook or class notes for charts and data tables. In regards to analyzing the data, you will be asked to work through a number of problems in your lab manual. Use the equation listed below for questions that it pertains to. Again, if you need help or clarification with any of the problems, please feel free to reach out to your TAs at any point. This prediction equation has been developed using up to 10 repetitions and is a method of 1 rep max estimation that describes the mathematical relationship between the number of reps performed to fatigue and the actual 1 rep max. A personal trainer may find the estimation method a more practical and safer alternative to maximal exertion testing, but factors such as age, training status, physical limitations, and fitness goals all help to define the most appropriate test protocol. Overall, this allows one to compare the predicted 1 rep max to a participant's measured 1 rep max value for a bench press. So here are a few key takeaways from today's lab. 1. Strength and endurance are specific to the muscle group, speed of contraction, type of contraction, and joint angle being tested. For optimal measurement and assessment, testing should be related to a subject's muscular fitness training. This means that for an untrained population, you would choose tests that activate large muscle groups, whereas for a sports-specific athlete, you may target smaller muscle groups. 2. The cost of maximal and endurance strength testing is low and requires minimal equipment setup. 3. The correlation between absolute endurance and strength has been reported to exceed 0.9. Therefore, standard load tests should be a reasonable predictor of strength. 4. Strength and endurance testing can be a good way of assessing overall strength, tracking improvements, identifying imbalances, and detecting muscular deficits in athlete populations.
So that now brings us to the conclusion of lab number 3. Today we had a look at the 1 rep max test, the standard load test, and the relative load test. If you have any questions or concerns about today's lab material, please do not hesitate to contact your TA. We are here to help you. I hope everyone has a great week, and we will talk to you soon. Bye!